It is officially here, Trainwreck Sports Fantasy Show. Now we're going to be having waiver wire shows, video content on Twitter and Instagram. So it's not just going to be about the podcast because, it's going to be weekly, of course. And then there's going to be the waiver wire podcast, but I want to get tidbits out from videos to who to add, who not to add, and buy issues, all that. I want it to be interaction based. I want to be interacting when I want to get guests on the show all the time, which I have one today. We'll introduce in a second. I want to get listeners interacting. I want listeners to listeners interacting. And that all works out because of league sizes, scoring formats. So it's all going to be great. I just want everyone involved now. And that includes you tweeting at anyone and everything. So do it. Now, who else to get on the first episode of this but Ryan Thomas Takes? Ryan, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. First pick, I go, first episode, who am I getting on? Ryan Thomas, the fantasy guru to me now.
I love it. Fantasy Guru 716.
And for everyone, by the way, yeah, if you guys don't know Ryan Thomas, he's been doing fantastic work for us. Great guy. You're going to drop your Twitter handle in a second there, Ryan Thomas. So make sure you follow him and follow his podcast as well. What is it?
My Twitter handle is @RyanThomasTake. And for the last 3, almost 4 years now, I have hosted the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. It's everywhere. So check it out. You guys will surely enjoy it. I guarantee it.
You absolutely will. I am on one of them, so you can go check that one out.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, even had you as a guest on the show. It was a good one.
And we did some fantasy football talk. So
we did.
So let's get into this. So I have a couple different things I want to bring up today. Clearly, some people have drafted, but I would consider this time period pre-draft fantasy football. So just talking who we're going to be taking, who should we be steering clear of, who to be worrisome of. So that, number one, Ezekiel Elliott. What are we doing here? I actually like him as the number one running back. I would probably take him number one off the board, but with this whole development with the Jerry Jones comment, I know you brought that to me. He's trying to hold out now. I feel like that's too much of a risk to be taking. What do you think?
More than any other year, I've been playing fantasy football since forever. It feels like more than any other year. I feel like if I already know where I'm picking in a league and I know that I'm picking, first overall, I am so hesitant to have that pick. I'm not as gung-ho about having that first overall pick as I normally would be, because we do not live in an ideal time as far as the NFL goes. We have players that are holding out in Ezekiel Elliott. We got some other guys that are holding out. We'll get to that. But as far as Ezekiel Elliott goes, I do agree with you that normally in an ideal world, he would be the guy that you would rush up to the podium and hand your card to, so to speak. But or hand your card to with his name on it to the commissioner. But you can't take him first overall right now. There's a really uncertain status as far as whether he'll be available for fantasy owners come week 1 and beyond, because this holdout, it looks like it's getting a little ugly. There's been some interaction between Ezekiel Elliott and Jerry Jones as far as what Ezekiel Elliott wants. He wants a deal that's more money than what Todd Gurley made. And Dallas made him an offer that was around those figures, and he declined it. So that says to me that this holdout is just getting started, and apparently he is going to be vacationing in Cabo, cutting everybody off until his agent gives him a call that has the right number. So I've crossed him off my list. If I'm picking first overall, I would suggest that everybody, until further notice, for now, cross him off your list as the first overall pick in your fantasy league.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that too. And the quote from Jerry Jones was, "You do not have to have a rushing champion to win a Super Bowl." When you hear that come out from the owner, that's not good. That's you don't want to be hearing that.
And if it's any other owner, it does hold weight. But when it's Jerry Jones saying that, it holds even more weight, because Jerry Jones always says a lot, but when he makes a statement like that, when there's a quote like that, we don't need a rushing champ in order to win a Super Bowl, that speaks volumes. And that was a question that he didn't necessarily have to answer. He could have dodged, ducked, dip, dived, and dodged that question any which way he wanted, and he didn't. So to me, that tells me that this situation is really only getting started, and it's a situation that I would urge fantasy owners to completely shy away from. It's not worth investing your first overall pick in a situation like a Le'Veon Bell situation last year for all those Le'Veon Bell owners that got burned for his holdout. You don't want that to happen 2 years in a row.
Oh, absolutely not. And that actually brings up a great point then. So this is still unraveling. Say we're mid through August. I mean, where does he go? I mean, if you're late in the first round, would you take a gamble? I'd probably still say no if he's still holding out. But at the same time, if you tell me, say you're in a 12-man league and you snag him at 12 and then he starts week 1, I mean, that's a steal. So
Right.
where is that fine line? I'd probably say on a personal level, if Ezekiel Elliott is there in the second round, I mean, and he's still holding out, I might have to just take him out of principle. I would hope he wouldn't hold out the whole year. Again, that's your own preference. That's a scary one. I'd probably go second round. I'd have to take him there just strictly because I would take him number 1, given no holdout. So how about you? I mean, what are you thinking on that?
I would say that as far as taking Ezekiel Elliott, if you have a snake draft where you're picking late in that first round, you're picking 10th, and then you pick 11th, you're picking 12th, and then you pick 13th, I would maybe use that first pick on a player that you know is going to play. And then if you really want to, quote unquote, get cute and really have a wow moment at the draft where everybody is shocked by your pick, I would maybe play with that second pick and say, well, maybe we'll just take a chance on him here. And even if Ezekiel Elliott is out the first 4 weeks of the season, we'll just say that is not ideal, as I said earlier, but I would still take that chance on him. But it would be tough. It would be really hard. I would have to be passing on somebody that I would have already had to have missed out on somebody else, maybe like an Odell Beckham or DeAndre Hopkins or somebody like that, in order to take that chance on Ezekiel Elliott. It depends on who's available to me. I always look at who's available when I'm picking and weigh all my options. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So definitely be aware. Be aware. So that actually, and that brings up another great guy, Melvin Gordon. I think it's a little less scary as the Zeke thing because of all the developments on the Zeke story, but it's absolutely something. I mean, he seems like he's standing his ground. I do know the Chargers are a bit more invested in him personally. I mean, they traded up for him in the draft when they got him. He's a great player. I feel confident that they will get something done. But just the fact that now you have Zeke doing it and Le'Veon already did it, it is scary because I thought most people did not think Le'Veon was going to sit out. They were like, no, they'll figure something out. Whole year done. It was a wash. So what do you think about him?
As far as Le'Veon Bell goes?
Or Melvin Gordon.
As far as Melvin Gordon, I would say that Melvin Gordon's situation, I'm much more encouraged by it in comparison to Ezekiel Elliott because I think Melvin Gordon genuinely wants to stay with the Chargers. His rookie contract dictates that he'll be paid around $5.6 million this year. Where I think we can all agree that he deserves a little bit more than that. He's one of the up and coming elite running backs in the league. I'd say he's somewhere in the top 5 range right now based on his season last year. He had a really great year. He did get hurt. He has had his fair share of injuries too. Maybe that is why the Chargers are a little bit hesitant to give him, a contract that is, upwards of what a Todd Gurley got or upwards of what Ezekiel Elliott is demanding. I feel like that's the number that the whole market is demanding. I think Todd Gurley's deal was 4 years, $67 million, if my memory serves me right. So we're not living in a day and age where running backs normally get paid that much money. And I think even the Los Angeles Rams would say to themselves, we just gave Todd Gurley 4 years for $67 million, and now he has knee problems.
Yeah, that's rough.
That's another situation that is one to really keep an eye on. I've never remembered a season where as many players switch teams or as many running backs have as many question marks as these top of the line running backs do. And I feel like with Melvin Gordon, I do feel confident that his situation will be sorted out prior to the season starting. But if it's not, I definitely feel he will be traded before the season starts.
Yeah, so I think it would be still a safe pick in the first round because I be very shocked if he didn't start. But I wouldn't judge you. I'd say second round, you have to take him. I wouldn't be too worried about him sitting out a whole year. But
Right.
but I think he will. He'll get the cleats on. He'll be playing. So I think if you late in the first round, I think it'd be worth a take. But that actually just
he really.
No, you go.
Oh yeah, he really wants to prove his worth, and really the only way to prove his worth outside of sitting out and being fined $40,000 a day that he's not in training camp would be to play. So I feel like this is his contract year. He could hold out for as long as he can with the Chargers and hope to get a new deal. But if he doesn't get that new deal, it's almost like he'll just have to, bite down on his mouthpiece and say, well, I really want to prove my worth. I really want to make more than Le'Veon Bell. I want to make more than Todd Gurley. I want to make more than those guys. And I definitely think, he's one of those running backs that has really reached the peak of his career, and he could have a phenomenal season this year if, in fact, he does play.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm very high on Melvin Gordon. I personally would take him top 5 as long as he's playing. As long as he's playing, I'd take him top 5, probably over any of the receivers.
With no question marks, I think you got to get that great back in the first round if you're picking in the top 5, and I would take him over a David Johnson for sure, due to the fact that Johnson's kind of on an island by himself in that offense, and I like the Chargers' offense a lot.
Oh yeah, I think they're going to be a great team. So we kind of talked about that a little bit about the Todd Gurley. Where do you think he's going? I mean, the injury is a big question mark, so that's scary to do. I think prior year, if there was no question mark on the injury, I'd probably even maybe put him in the top 5 as well. The dude's an absolute baller. It's a great team. But at this point in time, you take him and he doesn't end up playing. I don't think he's worth the first round pick.
It's funny because this story really is not a new one. This story dates back to his playing days at Georgia. He had a horrible knee injury in college, and it was a knee injury that most people thought he would never come back from. I would put it on, the level of a Willis McGahee knee injury, where his knee was completely blown out, and he had to have a lot of rehab, the fact that he came back within a year, was drafted, and has embarked on this NFL career after that knee injury was truly amazing. But you always wondered, how long would that knee hold up? And for the fact that he's only been playing in this league for about 4 or 5 years now, and he's already having the knee issues that he is having, I can tell you this. I did a 14-team mock draft, and there was people in it. It was full. People were picking. This wasn't an auto pick, nothing like that. People from all around the country.
Getting those reps in, right?
Yeah, getting those reps in, exactly. And Todd Gurley went 23rd overall.
Okay.
So if that tells me, second round, 23rd overall, that tells me that people are very hesitant to take him. And I think it really also stems from the fact that we all watched that Super Bowl last year. Why did Todd Gurley have X 10 carries or however little carries that he had in that game? It was due to the fact that he had that knee problem. They'll deny it. The Rams will deny it and say, no, he was healthy. We just, fell victim to the moment and all that stuff that they've made excuses for. But you can't tell me that that's not concerning. That very concerning.
Yeah, there's no argument there. I mean, he's a lead back. Healthy,
right.
He's an absolute elite back. So there'd be no excuse not using him. That's someone you would be getting the ball to in every scenario. You'd just be pounding him the ball. So there's just really no excuse except that he is injured, and that's really scary because, again, all those previous things, I mean, in 4 or 5 years in the league's a long time in theory, especially with a knee injury. So I personally am staying away too. I think if I saw him somewhere in the 3rd round, I might take a gamble. I'm not a gambler in fantasy, though. I like to be the safe route. So I personally probably wouldn't, but in terms if I had to rank him somewhere, I wouldn't go near him in the 1st round. If you told me he was going to be healthy, then it's just not a steal in the 1st round. If the 2nd round you get him and he's healthy, that's a steal, a risk.
Right.
Absolutely a steal, though. So, yeah, I definitely wouldn't go anywhere near him in the 1st round. I think everyone can agree with that.
If they came out, if the Los Angeles Rams came out and said, Todd Gurley is 100% healthy, we were open to having him as our feature back. He's the offense. He's the engine that keeps this team moving. I still wouldn't take him.
I wouldn't take him either. I wouldn't believe it.
Take him. Yeah, I wouldn't believe it because I'm not buying into that anymore. Like they kind of, in a way, lied to their fans a little bit because they were putting him in the game as if he was active, and then the game would play out and he was standing on the sideline, and CJ Anderson, of all running backs, a guy that was on the couch, signed off the couch pretty much,
playing
was
fantasy,
getting these carries. Yeah. And it really it really shocked me. They also drafted a running back out of Memphis that I really like, and I think his last name is Henderson, Darrell Henderson, who I really liked in the draft. He visited with the Buffalo Bills multiple times. He was somebody that they looked at, along with obviously Devin Singletary, who they eventually drafted. And I really like Henderson. So they have a young back now that could take the load if Todd Gurley's not available, and they're planning ahead for the worst. They have a better backup plan than CJ Anderson.
RTT dropping some sleeper picks right there. And actually, I think that's a really good sleeper because there's a potential he literally just can't even play. I mean, he wasn't playing at the end of the year, like you just said. He was active, but he was not playing. Barely any reps.
And that was so frustrating because I didn't have him on any teams, but I know people that did, obviously. And it's like,
I'm talking to one of them.
I don't want to beat people like that. I want to beat people at their best. I'll take a win, of course, but it was like I would beat the team that would have Todd Gurley, and he would start him, and Todd Gurley would get like 6-7 points.
Not even.
Just like, not even.
Yeah, not even.
So,
all right, so let's get into some receivers. I mean, some people could argue it, but I'm pretty sure at this point in time, most people are talking DeAndre Hopkins the number one receiver. I don't think there's too much question in that. I mean, there is, which is fair, but we'll just rank him at number one for now. Who's behind him? I mean, before, it used to be the Antonio Brown number one most of the time. I don't think so. I mean, who do we got on that back end? Like, we'll say ranking some top 5 receivers. I mean, where do you go? If DeAndre Hopkins gets off the board at 6, who are your next receivers?
I would say that it's a dead even tie between Devontae Adams and Odell Beckham Jr.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I would say it's a dead even tie between Devontae Adams and Odell Beckham Jr. And I'll tell you why. With Devontae Adams, he's steadily produced these last few seasons. He's got Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. He's a stud receiver. He's very underrated. You would look at his numbers on the fantasy week by week, and he was consistently putting up production. There's some players like a DeAndre Hopkins where one week he'll have 23 points and the next week he'll have 7. That's not what you want. You want steady 15 to 20 from your wide receiver one, and Devontae Adams can provide you that. As far as Odell Beckham goes, this new fit as far as him on the Cleveland Browns, I anticipate that we will see the return of Odell Beckham from 2, 3, 4 years ago, where he was just a fantasy monster. Everything that I've seen from him physically, he's in peak physical condition. Everything that I've seen from training camp is that he is just very hungry to prove that he was not a player that should have been traded. And when I'm drafting my team, I want guys that have the chip on their shoulder. And I think Odell Beckham is one of those guys. So I would definitely put him in my top 3 of fantasy football wide receivers because of that, and because he is immensely talented, and he has a far better quarterback throwing to him as far as the ability for Baker Mayfield to roll out and extend a play. I think Odell Beckham's fantasy value is actually at an all-time high in comparison to what it was with Eli Manning.
See, I feel like that is a bit of a hot take, so let me explain. So number one, I like Devontae Adams as well. I think the Packers are going to have a huge up year, and I think Rodgers is going to have a great year as well, and Devontae Adams is a stud. I mean, I think he's an easy top 2, top 3. Now, I don't like the Odell pick there, and it's absolutely no bash on his talent. The dude's an absolute beast. I just am looking at that roster, and it's quite stacked. I mean, from Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Callaway. Now you got Kareem Hunt, not yet, but he will be on there. Nick Chubb. I mean, Njoku. There's a lot of moving the ball I think is going to happen. Do you think he's going to be able to get that many catches? And again, I think he'll top 5, sure. But do you really think he could be that number 2? I mean, I guess probably, but I don't think I would take him there strictly because of the weapons they have. And I think he will still have a great year, but maybe not finish in that top 2 top 3 strictly because of the other weapons.
I think you got to think of it like this. When Baker Mayfield knows that he's going to pass the ball, who's the first guy that he's going to look to?
Okay.
And that's the thing that I feel, and I've seen it just from moments of their training camp. I follow, on my Twitter, I got, the Browns training camp. Just because I'm a football fanatic, as you well know, and as you are as well. And Baker Mayfield has been throwing the ball to Odell Beckham relentlessly, almost as if they're both trying to prove a point that they are both a match made in heaven, that there is no reason to be hesitant towards Baker Mayfield's personality, towards Odell Beckham's personality. I originally, when I saw that Odell Beckham got traded to Cleveland, I thought, this might not go well. But I genuinely feel that this will go well. I feel like out of all the weapons that you've mentioned, the one and that's a very great point that you made, but the one thing that I think is that of all the weapons that they have, the one that is a matchup nightmare in the slot on the outside is Odell Beckham. And I think he's going to be one of the more targeted players in fantasy football. And if you're looking at fantasy production, the one stat that can really allude to fantasy production is targets. So I think he's going to have a good year. And I think he'll actually be a guy that, if I look at the overview of the season, I think he's going to be a player that as the weeks wear on, he's going to get better. And those weeks 10 to week 14, 15, 16 are obviously the most important for a fantasy season if you're really trying to make a playoff run or if you're trying to go get that chip. So I really like Odell Beckham. I think he's going to do really well this year. And I'd put him right at a tie. I put Devontae Adams a little bit ahead of him because he's already established in that Green Bay Packers offense. But Odell Beckham is right there underneath him just based on his talent alone.
Okay, so what if we chalked it up as this then? I could very well see that happening, and I don't want to dissect the Browns too much. We'll get past this really quick. But so maybe the other players' value drops a lot. Like Jarvis Landry maybe then would drop a lot. I mean, I guess I was picturing Baker moving the ball around a ton and them using the different ones. But I guess when you do put it that way, I mean, Odell Beckham could be the most talented receiver in the league. I'm okay with saying that. So I guess if you put it that way and he just sells out with that, maybe the value drops on Landry. I don't think Njoku value is there. I think he's a great player. I wouldn't take him because I don't go high on tight ends, but maybe the running back value drops because he is pounding the ball to Odell Beckham. So that is a way to think of it as well. And I actually really do like that point. So, okay, maybe you changed my mind a little bit there, but okay, so where would you put Michael Thomas then?
Michael Thomas, I would put right underneath Odell Beckham, and the only reason why is Michael Thomas is also holding out as well. He has had his instances with the team where he wants to make more money and stuff like that. And when I got a guy that is holding out, I can't chance it. If I'm looking at who I need to take, I'm taking the guys that are ready to play for the team. Odell Beckham, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins. Holdouts, you never know how it is going to play out. And if I'm picking anybody else, if those three guys are gone, which I think they will be, if those three guys are gone, and then you have the choice between Michael Thomas or name another receiver. I'm drawing a blank here.
We'll go back to this because I want to say this real quick, which will help you. So, so what do you do this year in terms of this? So Antonio Brown, okay, and Julio Jones are generally ranked higher than, say, Mike Evans and who's another young guy? I don't know, for the sake of it. Juju Smith-Schuster, okay?
Right.
The two old guys, which are, I don't want to say old. I mean, of course, Julio Jones is absolutely insane, so is Antonio Brown, but they're up there. So would you take them over, say, I mean, I know Mike Evans, but I think Winston will have an up year, and I also, Juju Smith-Schuster, I mean, he's young. I mean, would you flip them strictly because of the age and the change? And
Right. I would flip. If you're really honestly to name the guy that I would take over Michael Thomas due to the fact that Michael Thomas is holding out, I would take Juju Smith-Schuster. I would take Juju Smith-Schuster over Mike Evans and over Antonio Brown, just due to the fact that he's young. He really fits into that offense well. I think his opportunity for targets are a lot different in comparison to Antonio Brown. Juju Smith-Schuster is the type of receiver that can withstand the wear and tear of a National Football League. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. He's somebody that I think Big Ben will heavily rely on, and is somebody that I think, as the season wore on last year, I saw him evolve. I saw him play better one-on-one with some of the better corners in the National Football League. The sky is the limit for Juju Smith-Schuster. And if I'm, as you said, you don't want to take many gambles on your fantasy draft. You want sound players that you know will get targets, you know will get production. Juju Smith-Schuster is that. Mike Evans, there's question marks with him due to his quarterback. And there was
new coach, though.
New coach too. But there was another receiver that you named, Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, I think, is a massive red flag at this point for me, just due to the fact that there's a huge disparity between Big Ben as a fantasy quarterback and Derek Carr. Maybe Antonio Brown will make Derek Carr better as a fantasy quarterback and as a quarterback in general. But Antonio Brown, as you said, is getting up there, and his foundation of his game is his quickness. And as he gets older, he's going to lose that. Is he going to lose that this year? Is he going to lose that next year? Only time will tell. But I take the young guns over the old dogs any day of the week.
Yeah, so that pretty much answers it. Yeah, because I don't think Antonio Brown's going to have a bad year, but when you start stacking them up, it's like, yeah, who's got the red flags? Who's the young guns coming up? I think I would totally agree with that, so probably flop then. There's two more things I want to get into. So where would you put Julio with? I kind of think the Falcons might have a down year. Matt Ryan obviously had that great year. He's kind of sketched me out a bit. And then actually one of the new developments, Tyreek Hill, which is ranked pretty much in that 4, 5, 6. I've seen him, He was carted off today. He had the leg injury, so he could be done for the year. So now he could be gone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, when one domino falls, it really changes the rankings heavily, because you need that receiver in that first, second round range that will be that constant point getter for you. And if Tyreek Hill is gone, then you got to look at who's the next man up. And that's where a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster moves up the board even more for me. That's where a guy like Mike Evans moves up the board even more for me. But knowing that, I think Julio Jones will move up the board more for me. And I will say this about Julio Jones: of all the receivers that we've talked about, there is no receiver in the National Football League that is as untouchable one-on-one as Julio Jones is. He's a matchup nightmare for NFL corners. And I feel like the goal for the Falcons should be to get him more involved in the offense, especially within the red zone. And you go back and you look at some of his touchdown totals from previous seasons. They're not as high as you would expect them to be. And that's where I see the hesitation in taking him. But it's also where I could see the upside, that if I'm sitting in the second round and Julio Jones is there early in the second round, I would have to consider it just based on the fact that he is a true wide receiver one, and he is somebody that is going to get his targets. So I would take Julio Jones over Antonio Brown. I'll tell you that for sure.
That's a great point. So now let's get in. We talked some running backs, talked some receivers, quarterbacks. Now I don't want to talk about the top quarterbacks, because I mean we could, but what about some of the question mark quarterbacks? For instance, Jimmy G. I mean, they do have like a revamped team. He's still, all these years, he's still unproven. He's really just a big question mark, and he's been here for so long. Do you think he will just step back up and be a viable fantasy option? Would you roll the die and actually take him as your quotation starting quarterback? Would you maybe try to steal him really late as just like a backup? I mean, the questions like Derek Carr, that 1 year he had a great year. I mean, now he's got some weapons around him as well. Would you trust him as a quarterback one? Would you stray somewhere else?
Yeah, I would say as far as Jimmy Garoppolo goes, my strategy is usually to wait on a quarterback as long as possible. But you do have to know when to strike, because usually when you strike, it's while the iron's hot. It's when you start to see a team take one quarterback, an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, or we'll just say a Ben Roethlisberger. But as I said, I would go with a young gun over an old dog at this point. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo, when healthy, was on a trajectory, an upward trajectory. So I'm going to assume that he's healthy again, because he is healthy again. And he would be a major sleeper for me. in the quarterback fantasy football rankings, because I feel like the San Francisco 49ers are going to let it fly. They really want to take the training wheels off, so to speak, and let him run the offense to his full capability, because this is really his first opportunity in his entire career to be the guy. And you want to talk about a guy that has a massive chip on his shoulder after that ACL injury, which was just terrible for him.
It was devastating. I didn't like to see it. I like him as a guy. And I actually don't even mind the 49ers. I was pretty upset about that as well. I wanted to see him play this year.
Right. Yeah, I want to see him prove his worth, and I know he can play. I mean, he's proven it in instances with New England, and he's proven it in instances with the 49ers. So he's somebody that I would definitely hope lasts a really long time. I would hope that people in my fantasy leagues wouldn't take him, and maybe I can get him, or maybe I let the cat out of the bag and now somebody else will get him late. But Jimmy Garoppolo is a quarterback that I really like. As far as other quarterbacks that I really like, that I think will have huge bounce back years, that I'm willing to take a chance on. Dak Prescott, I think, is going to have a better year as far as fantasy production, with more time with Amari Cooper as his wide receiver one. They do have old Jason Witten back. How much he'll contribute,
why?
I don't know. But how much he'll contribute, I don't know. But it is nice to kind of have that tight end safety valve. You know that he is that, and you also know that you'll see Dak Prescott throw the ball more without Ezekiel Elliott if Ezekiel Elliott is not there potentially. So when one domino falls, another domino kind of you'll see more from one other player. It raises the stock of Dak a little bit. And then I really like Mitch Trubisky as a sleeper quarterback as well. He's somebody that I would take over a Derek Carr, as you mentioned earlier. I think the sky's the limit for him. Running the football, he's mobile. He can throw a real nice deep ball, very accurate. He's somebody that I think the sky's the limit for him as well. So I'm looking at those quarterbacks that can take that next step up into being, a potential top 10 guy. And I think Jimmy G, Dak Prescott, and potentially Mitch Trubisky are those three guys for sure.
Yeah, so I like that. So what about this then? So, he's ranked pretty low on most of the charts if you were to take a peek. Very well so, but Nick Foles. He's going to be the starter.
Right.
Yeah, clearly not start him at, I don't think well, this is the thing. Could you draft him super late? Clearly you just need a quarterback at this point. Could you draft him and say that's going to be my number one guy? Or would you strictly say, no, get someone else, put him as your backup and maybe?
I would draft him if I'm drafting him. If I have no quarterbacks and I've already filled out my running backs, my wide receivers, tight ends, even some of my bench, and waited that long to take him, I would take Nick Foles and take another quarterback immediately after that, whether that is a younger gun, maybe a Josh Allen or a Sam Darnold, and hope that Foles can hold the fort down for a little bit, and hope that one of those second-year quarterbacks really takes that next big step that Mitch Trubisky took last year. That would be the direction I would go if I were to take Foles that late. I would hope that there's some young gun available still too, and I could take that guy and maybe see where he's at. Or maybe if I take Nick Foles, then maybe I take a Derek Carr and just find out which one is better and just roll with the hot hand.
Yeah, because that's actually kind of I don't know how people play it. Personally, I never draft high on a quarterback. I'm not taking Mahomes. I'm not taking this guy. My last picks are like those late round quarterbacks. I know I'll probably get judged for this one. Kirk Cousins, he gets the yards, he gets the points. Of course, he's not getting as much as the top guy, but then with waiting on that, I'm getting stud running backs, stud wide receivers where I'm not worrying about that later. I'll roll the hot hand, where this is where Fitzmagic comes in, and always once a year there's a Fitzmagic week where you get to pick him up and he's your hot hand of the week. So that's kind of how I roll with it. I know it sounds rough. I won with it, okay? But actually, that brings up a good point. I brought up, but Patrick Mahomes. Again, I don't sell out on quarterbacks, but if you did tell me he was going to play like he did last year, I would maybe. I'm not going to do it because I don't think he will keep like that level up. But if he does, though, I mean, he was having insane points where then it would be
Yes,
worth
he
it.
was.
But can he keep that up?
I think that's a really good question. I actually think that's the biggest question of fantasy football this year. And that's how it usually is. Whoever had the biggest year the year before, whoever really burst out of the scene, can he do that again?
Deshaun Watson, like last year.
Yeah, right. I know one thing that all the NFL defensive coordinators over the offseason have been looking at him, wondering how the heck did he put up the numbers that he did? What was it about the Kansas City Chiefs offense that allowed him to just really take games over? And I think
Hill.
I think Kelsey Hill. I also think Kareem Hunt was massive for that offense. I like Williams, who was his replacement as well, but I don't think he's Kareem Hunt. And with the Tyreek Hill injury, we'll only time will only tell on that. I think we've kind of already answered this question going back to the beginning of the show, where when you have this many questions for the elite of the elite running backs, and you have a shallow pool of tight ends to select from, and you have wide receivers that the wide receivers will be flying off the board, you really can't afford to chance whether or not Pat Mahomes will put the numbers up that he has. You got to go get that running back. You got to go get that wide receiver. You got to go get one of the big three. If one of the wide receivers isn't available that you like, one of the big three as far as the tight ends that you and I well know are the big three: Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Zach Ertz. And then maybe let the draft dictate itself. Let that team overdraft 42-year-old Tom Brady. Let that team overdraft Aaron Rodgers, who always gets overdrafted and seemingly always gets hurt. And I hate to say that, because there's years where he hasn't gotten hurt, but he's only going to get hurt more because he's getting older. So, like I said, I really would hold on to the value and let yourself really fill your roster, even fill some of your bench before you take a quarterback in this year's fantasy football season.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So I got two questions then. So
sure.
We pretty much said don't overvalue Mahomes. I agree with that. Don't overvalue him. But with that being said, you're still late in the draft. Is he the first quarterback off the board then? So don't overstretch for him, but is he the first off the board?
Oh, for sure.
For sure. Okay, so that's pretty much in place.
Yeah.
Just don't stretch for him just because it's Pat Mahomes and expect the same output. I think he could, but I wouldn't expect that same output, especially, again, with the Tyreek thing, Kareem Hunt gone. But first one off the board.
Yeah, first one off the board. And I mean, it really depends on how the draft plays itself out. If you end up with, a wide receiver combo, if you somehow, some way end up with, let's just say, Odell Beckham and Juju Smith-Schuster, two guys that I think are going to have monster years, then maybe you do take Pat Mahomes, because you have a combo of players that will get targets, that will get production. And maybe you think to yourself, well, I got so much value here with these two guys. If I can somehow go over the top and get even more value based on the production that he had last year, and Pat Mahomes slides to me in the, even though he's the even though he's the first quarterback off the board, in my opinion, I think he potentially could slide into the third round. If these players that you're playing with are smart, they will do what I'm saying they should do. They will wait to take a quarterback. They will take the running back in the first round, wide receiver, and then Mahomes, if he's there. That would be the ideal strategy. If you are going to go as high as you want to get Pat Mahomes, make sure you get a running back, wide receiver before you do it. Or if you don't get that wide receiver or running back that you like, maybe go wide receiver, tight end, running back, quarterback. So I always try to go into a draft with a little bit of a mental note of the order in which I'm going to take the positions that I'm going to take. And it really depends on what other people do. And it's an on-the-fly strategy, but I obviously like to know what order of the positions that I'm going to take and when I'm going to take them.
Yeah, and you could even, when you think about it, if you can dictate the draft correctly and you take that Patty Mahomes 4 or 5, then the quarterbacks are going to slide off the board then anyway. So everyone will be taking a quarterback then anyways, and then you get Pat Mahomes. If you can dictate it right, don't stretch to that second round, because I wouldn't be worried about someone doing that. I'm still not going to go for a quarterback. And real quick, I actually don't like your strategy. I won't go anywhere near tight end until at least 6th, 7th round. With that being said, I also go running back, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. I don't sell out on quarterbacks, and I don't sell out on tight ends. I get my running backs and I get my receivers.
But I'll throw you this though, and I only threw out that scenario because I agree with you. I would not go a tight end in the first 4 rounds of a draft. But what if you ended up, and you easily could? You know, it happens all the time. There's teams that end up with these crazy rosters in 10, 12, even 14 team leagues. If one guy reaches for one guy, it sends this huge shockwave throughout the entire draft. What if you end up with Odell Beckham, Juju Smith-Schuster, and then, or you have a Odell Beckham, Juju Smith-Schuster combo due to the fact that you didn't get one of the elite running backs, and you passing on Ezekiel Elliott due to the fact that he's holding out. You're passing on Michael Thomas due to the fact that he's holding out, and you have the opportunity to have Travis Kelce and Pat Mahomes. Would you turn that down?
And you're saying like 3rd or 4th round?
3rd and 4th round. Yep.
Turn it down.
Turn it down.
Turn it down.
Really?
And I wouldn't judge you if you did it.
Buy into that. Yeah.
I would get it because I guess now when you think about Tyreek Hill maybe not being there and the Kareem Hunt not being there, I mean, you just have to imagine Kelce will get even more work with it. He had a great year. But I still wouldn't do it on my personal drafting philosophy. I just could not. I couldn't get myself to do it.
Right.
Couldn't get myself to do it.
You would really have to hope that your running back sleepers are there.
And it'd be a gamble, which there could be.
Right.
And that's time for another show where we'll get into some running back sleeper. Yeah. Actually, sleepers all around the board. But there is one quarterback I wanted to bring up. So Cam Newton was a 2015 amazing year. By the way, I want the record straight. I despise Cam Newton. I do not like this guy. But I actually think he's going to have a really good year. I think the Panthers could have a really good year. They've revamped the O-line. Christian McCaffrey is getting better, even better.
Yes,
he's already great.
Yes, he is.
He could throw it out of the backfield to him. I mean, I think I don't want to say he's going to be like number 1 quarterback, but I think a lot of people, and including myself generally, would say, I'm not going near him. I'll let him drop, and who cares about Cam Newton? But I think this year, if there's 10 quarterbacks off the board and he's there, and I probably would take a gamble on him. I think he's actually going to have a good year because the last couple have been pretty mediocre.
I'll tell you this. I think, and I was looking at a ranking earlier today as far as quarterbacks go, and I had it memorized in my brain. Mahomes number 1,
Deshaun Watson something
number 2. Yeah, Deshaun Watson was up there with Andrew Luck, I think tied at 3. I think Cam Newton potentially, if he stays healthy, could be the 3rd or 2nd best fantasy quarterback this year. I'm right there with you as far as the sky is the skill set of Cam Newton for fantasy football is a dream to anyone that takes him, because if he's running in the end zone, that's 6 points instead of 4, depending on your scoring. That's how most leagues are scored. He can potentially get you 2 extra points if he's running a touchdown in, and we know that he likes to do that. But I think the Panthers are going to dial that down a little bit. But I think being that he can throw to the one player that can create opportunity just as well as anyone in the league in Christian McCaffrey, a 3-yard pass to Christian McCaffrey could turn into a 38-yard pass or a 48-yard pass.
With a
Christian
touchdown.
McCaffrey with a touchdown. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey is a very rare player, and anyone that is playing in the same backfield as him, I think has massive value. Value.
So I guess I'd put it in terms of this, and I might try to change my philosophy. Again, I'm usually not a gambler, but that would be a good, or not in fantasy football, by the way. But I usually don't gamble in fantasy. I usually try to take that safe route. But if you do like to, again, you like those high ceiling players, I think he's definitely one of them this year, kind of like we just said. So so I could see someone stretching for that because, again, it could easily pay off. So I wanted to definitely bring him in because he's been pretty rough the last couple of years in terms of calling him a 2 or 3, which he never was these last 2 years. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think this year more than any, I've never remembered a season where there's this many question marks of top players, even guys that aren't holding out, guys like Saquon Barkley. I know he had a phenomenal year, one of the greatest rookie running back seasons of all time, but being that he's the only weapon that offense really has, I worry about the defense is stacking the box and limiting his production. And I look at guys, like you said, with the high floor, the high ceiling, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey.
And the well-rounded team as well.
Right, and the well-rounded team. So those are the guys that if I'm picking first overall, and I tweeted this the other day, and it got a lot of attention, not necessarily locking in Saquon Barkley as my first overall pick or Ezekiel Elliott for sure based on the holdout as my first overall pick, I should say. I'm looking at guys that can contribute, get their touches, and have no question marks. And I think Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey fit that bill immensely for whoever takes them.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I did say one more question, but I do have one more. Yeah. This is going to be the final one. Would you put Baker Mayfield in the top 5, and if not higher?
I would put Baker Mayfield, I think,
as a high ceiling player again. I mean, that could be another gambling pick, right?
Right. I would put Baker Mayfield in the top 5. I think, along with Cam Newton, potentially, if he stays healthy. I always preface my statement by saying that. But if Baker Mayfield stays healthy with this offense, yes, I think potentially Baker Mayfield could have a better year than Pat Mahomes this season. Not a better year than Pat Mahomes had last season, but I think this season Baker Mayfield could have a better year than Pat Mahomes. I really do. And I got to say,
what would happen to ruin that? I mean, you got even more weapons. He looked fantastic. I mean, What happens? He takes a step back. I'd be very surprised because he only took steps forward and the team only got better. But yeah, so.
And he plays 6 games a year against his division, obviously. And I think that division is really it's at a very interesting point because I look at like the hierarchy of the division, the way Cleveland is trending, the way the other teams are trending. I think Cleveland, the way Cleveland's trending, I think they are going to rule that division, if not this year, for a long time. You need that one move to put you into contention, and they made that move. They had the guts to make that move, whereas any team could have offered a first-round pick for Odell Beckham. He was available to any and all teams, and they said, we're going to strike while the iron's hot. We're going to make this offense even better than it already was going to be. I'm buying into Cleveland. I think they're going to have a really good year. If it doesn't happen this year, it's going to happen. It's inevitable.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, their defense is stacked. They got a great team over there. It's kind of scary.
They do. Very scary to go from winning 1 game in 2 years to pretty much looking on paper as if you could potentially be a dynasty. It's pretty awesome. So
don't even want to think about it right now. Good for them. I don't hate that team. I like Cleveland, so I mean, good for them.
Right.
It sucks when you see these teams do that. I guess they've had a lot worse in the last couple of years, but turned it around quick. I'm pretty sure. And I have to imagine I put them at least 8-8. I think they will do better than that. But
I think they will too. And I want to definitely make my mark with this. I think that Josh Allen could potentially be a Mitch Trubisky-esque quarterback as far as fantasy goes. I think he might even bring more value than Mitch Trubisky just based on his insanely just ridiculous running ability. I don't think Buffalo will want him to run as much as he did last year, but I think the passing numbers will be so much better. Completion, per attempt, yards per attempt numbers will be better. Last year, you look at some of his stats, and he was really throwing the ball deep just based on the fact that they didn't really have much else to their offense other than his deep ball. This year, as you well know, there's Cole Beasley in town, and there's John Brown in town. So I think that will fit the deep ball tendencies that Josh Allen has, and it'll also kind of rein Josh Allen in to be able to check things down over the middle. And you still have Zay Jones, who's an immensely talented receiver. I think the sky's the limit for him. And I think Josh Allen is going to have a very good year this year. And I'd be more than willing to say that you mentioned two quarterbacks earlier, Nick Foles and Derek Carr. I'm higher on Josh Allen than both of those guys. If Josh Allen's
I would be too.
Go with the young gun and see what he can do for you. And if it's a keeper league, even better, because you have a young quarterback at very low value or at very high value, picked very late in a draft, where you could keep him for the next couple of years. So that's pretty fun.
Yeah, actually, I've been on the field for a couple of the training camps. You could tell he's actually looking checkdowns now instead of, and trust me, you want to utilize that arm, but some of the times he would roll out and he would just lug something up and it'd be nothing, where now he's actually taking the dump pass and some of them are turning off to 50-yard runs. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, as he's taking those steps, he could absolutely be a nice sleeper.
For sure.
With a huge ceiling. Huge ceiling.
If you're in a 2-quarterback league and you need that second quarterback, I can't think of anybody better than him.
Oh, he would have to be taken in that.
He would have to be selected as one of those 2 quarterbacks. And I think this year, there's going to be a lot of players that are going to come out of the woodwork and really impress a lot of people that are in that young, quarterback or young running back or young wide receiver range. And it's going to be a fun season for sure.
Oh, yeah. Bills Mafia.
Gotta love it. Gotta love the Bills fans. They are the best fans on the face of the earth. I always said that prior to starting my podcast. I would say that to myself all the time, but I truly believe it now.
Believe it. Love it. Well, for the first episode, thanks for anyone tuning in, listening. Again, I want interaction. So from what we talked about, if there's something you want to talk about, something you want to talk about on the show, again, tweet at it, message, whatever. We could talk about it because obviously every league's different, league size, scoring format. But yeah, just keep the interaction going. And I want to say thank you again to Ryan Thomas Takes for coming on. Drop your handle again for whoever's still listening.
Yes, my Twitter handle is @Ryan Thomas Take. I'm getting big on Twitter. I've had some growth. There's definitely some growth, and I got about 1,050 followers. Join the Takeover. Follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram as well. It's the same as my Twitter handle, Ryan Thomas Take as well. And my show is Sunday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays every week, from MMA fight breakdowns to football breakdowns, fantasy football stuff, baseball playoff, projections, and I'll have a lot of stuff coming. A lot of really great guests will be on it, as you were on it as well. You were a great guest, and I look forward to communicating with all the sports fans out there.
Yeah. So basically what he's saying is if you follow sports, follow Thomas Takeover.
Yeah, definitely. I think the podcast is doing very well right now. I got some Apple Podcast reviews yesterday that I was just blown away by how positive the reviews were, and just how awesome the MMA fans and the football fans and the hockey fans and just all the fans out there that listen to the show that are sports fans. I love all of them. They're all great. Even the Dolphins fans out there that listen to me shred on the Dolphins, or the Jets fans that have me, that hate on me for shredding the Jets part. I have to do that as a Bills guy. I just have.
You're obligated to.
It's my moral duty to do that.
It's our job. Well, again, thanks again, everyone, for listening. Definitely we'll have him back on the show, so you'll be listening to him. I have some more guests lined up, and just stay tuned and stay interactive. So thank you again. Good night now.